Good morning, everybody, and you're very welcome to this morning's signpost webinar. My name is Noel Meehan. I'm Head of Water Quality KT in TEAGASC, and I'll be hosting this week's webinar. This morning, we're joined by Dr. David Wall. He's Enterprise Leader and a Senior Research Officer in Johnstown Castle, and also by Cathal Redmond, Research Technologist, also based in Johnstown Castle. And today, they will be jointly presenting on very interesting topic, increasing the precision nutrient use in tillage and the tools and technology to achieve this. We're also joined as well by Fiona Doolin, who's Catchment Coordinator with the Better Farm for Water campaign in the Boyne Catchment. So everybody, you're all very welcome this morning.
Thanks, Carl. Great to be out on a miserable morning like this. So
yeah, Halloween. So hopefully there's no gremlins in the system that will impact on the webinar today. So you're very welcome, everybody. So David, just you're Enterprise Leader in Johnstown Castle and obviously Senior Research Officer. What's the Enterprise Leader role?
I suppose, Noel, managing the resource in Johnstown Castle, as you know, I suppose we're the home of the Environment, Soils and Land Use Research, and Karen Daly, and that is looking after the research side. But we have the farm resource and the labs, etc. So basically managing those with the team there on the ground. Strategically, what should we be doing in terms of the farm resource, in terms of the research that's going on in the systems with the new organic farm at the moment. And, we're going to open or launch the new labs, the National Agricultural Sustainability and Innovation Centre on the 14th of November. So busy times at Johnstown Castle, and, things are looking good.
Yeah, some very interesting new additions to the campus down there, particularly the new research labs. That'll be a big benefit to the.
Look, it gives us capacity, I suppose, to do all that analysis in soil health being the new one there, water, biodiversity, soil biology, greenhouse gases, and carbon. So a lot of demand for that stuff at the moment.
Good stuff. So look at just before you start presenting there, just to remind attendees that you can put your questions into the Q&A system there, and we will have a Q&A at the end of the webinar. So I think what's going to happen is, David, you're going to present initially, and then you're going to switch over to Cathal.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. So you can start going there. So just a reminder, pop your questions into the Q&A. So we'll talk to you in a few minutes again. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Noel, for the kind introduction. So today I'm going to talk about NUTRI-CHECK network. This is a project or a thematic network across Europe that has been on the go since 2023 and is due to finish at the end of the year. And the aim here is to assess farmer needs for improving the precision of arable crop nutrition management, as Cathal or as Noel has outlined. So without further ado, let's get into this. What is this network about, and I suppose what have we been doing over the last 2 years? Right. Okay. So in terms of this network, it's right across Europe, from Portugal down in the Mediterranean climate, to, I suppose, our own neck of the woods, Atlantic, Northwest Europe, out to the eastern side where we have Lithuania and Poland, and not forgetting, I suppose, Greece on the other side there in the Mediterranean climate. So basically a cross-section of European climates, European soils, and I suppose what farmers are doing in terms of European farmers, different demographic, different, I suppose, methods, different crops to some degree, although we focused around some specific crops, namely cereals, potatoes are as the root crop, and maize or corn, as it may be, in some areas, as a fodder crop that has a lot of prevalence and a lot of nutrients being used on that. So the aim of the project to improve the precision of crop nutrition by compiling nutrition decision tools, I suppose, number one. So we have many tools available to us as advisors or as farmers or as industry, and then to promote farm-to-farm nutrition checking and facilitating knowledge exchange. So, is there knowledge in other parts, other countries there that we're not using, and vice versa? And how can we get behind, I suppose, that need for better precision, better efficiency in nutrition for many reasons, for cost, number one, and production, maintaining yields, but also for meeting those targets for water quality, as we're all aware of here at the moment, and also greenhouse gas emissions. So nutrients are integral, and nutrient management is critical for achieving those multiple targets. But not forgetting that nutrients are the fuel in the system for food production to start off with, and we don't want to lose those nutrients to air or water. The focus here is on the macronutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And as I've said, wheat, maize, and potatoes were the crops of focus. Obviously, there's other crops in the mix, but those were, I suppose, the model crops that we looked at that were present in most of the countries that we were in, and give enough variation, I suppose, to be able to see how different tools or different strategies of nutrient management might be focused around these three crops. And the method, I suppose, through co-creation between farmers, advisors, and experts. So everybody is involved, all the different actors in the network, and they all contribute in different ways. Obviously, the farmer is the primary user. The advisor is maybe using those tools in conjunction with the farmer, or using those tools separately to inform the farmer. And obviously, you have other experts in the industry. So everybody from the people supplying the inputs to other agronomists and the agronomists associated with the buyers of grain or potatoes or maize, to demands from food buyers and others besides. And as I said, 9 countries involved there in the network, including Ireland, Denmark, France, Greece, Lithuania, Netherlands, Poland, Portugal, and the UK. So, and a wide outreach. So that kind of sets the scene for who we are and what we were doing. I suppose in terms of the project framework, how are those groups, I suppose, tasked, or how do they interact around the network, and what aspects are they getting involved in? So in each of the countries, we had a national expert groups, and they can review and advocate best decision tools and practice. So, they are the experts in their own right, and they're the think tank, I suppose, in terms of what tools, what decisions need to be made around nutrient management, or what practices might be proposed as being the best practices. We wanted to create an inventory of decision tools that are out there, and this is quite extensive. When you do the trawl and you look at what's out there, within Europe, and those were the constraints, we have over 100 tools identified that specifically deal with aspects of crop nutrition, nutrient management planning. Crop nutrition clubs then are the farmers. These are key and central to the whole network. They're going to evaluate, or we're tasked with evaluating the decision support tools, and looking at opportunities on farm to change things in terms of how things are done. And they also feed back to the national expert groups, and disseminate to other farms in their area, and that snowball effect. We obviously have an online platform that's there and present in many of these networks to share and review tools and other information, and obviously a dissemination work package, as would be commonplace with any project. just before I get into the meat of the presentation, I suppose, we came up with this concept at the start in terms of the consortium and you know, in the early days of the project, in terms of what do we need to be doing in terms of crop nutrition, decision making, what are the key aspects that we need to be looking at in a more fundamental way. And you know, we came up with this three-step checking approach. You know, and it, you know, it's fairly logical when you think about it. You have that planning step is number one. That's, you know, prior to the season starting or in the early days of the season, where you're planning your crops, obviously, what rotation or what crops are going in what fields, but also using your soil samples and that information to say, okay, I have X amount of nutrients in the soil. How much more do I need? What fertilizers do I need or organic manures do I need to input for a plan with an expectant yield? You know, we all expect the yield going to be whatever at the start of the year. That could be January, it could be prior to Christmas when we're planning what we're going to do. What that turns out to be in reality is a whole other ball game, because weather, you know, planting, etc. There's many other factors that impinge and come in there and adjust maybe what we had planned or what we had targeted as a yield. And I suppose that moves quickly on to step two. You know, are we checking mid-season enough, and are we adjusting our nutrient management plans or those plans that we made early in the season prior to the crop or the seeds being put in the ground? And that, you know, what tools are available for helping us inform that adjustment of nutrient management planning? And then finally, at the end of the year, do we take enough time to review our success, our progress, if we're on a soil fertility build-up type mission in certain fields, and what other information is there to inform that review and maybe to inform the following year in terms of what you might change or what you might do better? And these are three important steps that we kind of got around within the clubs, but also tasked the national expert groups to really take hold and have a look at. So that three-step checking approach, you know, crop nutrition is the biggest expense on farms and to the world, so it must be planned. But few crops grow to a plan, so then checking during the growth and adjusting if necessary, then reviewing the final harvest to know what the outcomes and to learn. And I suppose this network is all about learning. Any farmer or manager must take these steps, especially for best or responsible crop nutrition, and the creation of a network and best practices within that network will develop a toolbox to support farmers in implementing the three-step checking approach. So I won't spend too much time. Cathal is going to talk about the crop nutrition clubs, but we had these clubs. They're across all the countries, and you know, the aim here is to evaluate on-farm decision tools and opportunities, and to feed back into the network and to share experiences with other farmers. Getting into it then. Okay, so we would have looked at the needs of farmers at the early part of this network, and what are the needs around nutrient management, crop nutrition. We conducted a survey of farmers and farm advisors and other stakeholders, and in total we had 714 responses to these surveys. If you look at the breakdown here in terms of the figure on the left, the pie chart on the left, fairly even distribution across all the countries in terms of the responses. So you can see there in Ireland we had 12% of the total responses, and the biggest there from France. And if we look at geography and size of the country, that's about right. It's about proportional to what you'd expect in terms of a balanced survey. Then if we look at the pie chart on the right, you can see there in terms of who responded to the survey. So farmers, land managers are about 46% of the total responses. Farm advisors, another 19-20%. When you include crop agronomists, that brings that figure up to around 30% between farm advisors and agronomists. And then you had the other actors there, industry input side, industry in terms of crop grain purchaser, and industry in terms of support services. Policymakers were also included, and some research, although specifically we weren't after research and academics per se in terms of finding out what are the needs of farmers. In terms of the results, one question that we posed earlier, what are the main drivers for improving crop nutrition on farms? And by and large, these results were fairly similar in all the countries. Some of the countries in the Eastern Bloc, I suppose, didn't have maybe some of the regulatory pressures on farmers in terms of the environment. As long they do have them, and they are signed up to meeting some of the environmental targets, but it's more recent, and in more recent years that really they've got to grips, or their governments and that have got to grips with that. So it's not surprising, I suppose, that economics was number one. That's the primary piece. A farmer wants to grow the crop and wants to make a decent living or a profit for themselves and their family, or for reinvesting in their business. And the first two, 91% of the respondents came back and said economic was the primary driver, production then a close second at 77%. The market was another one. Crops like malt and barley, where you have to meet a fairly narrow spec, and for other crops like potatoes, etc., market does dictate in terms of nutrient management what you might do in terms of nitrogen management, etc., etc. Policy was another 30% there. Was driven by policy in that reasoning to why you want to improve crop nutrition, and the environment there for about a third of respondents put the environment forward. So again, you can see there the mix, probably not surprising, but production and economics number one, but there are other factors there of significance impacting on the decisions. What are the primary motivations then? A little bit different question. You have a driver, but you have the motivations. Increase in profitability, increase in crop yield potential, were the first two there at a little over 60 or around 60% each. Compliance with environmental regulation here comes out to be the next one, and it mightn't have been the primary driver, but it's obviously a motivation there because of compliance and that piece with farmers. Reduced input costs, I suppose fertilizers have become more expensive, is next up, coupled with environmental sustainability coming in there. So that whole social consciousness and wanting to do the right thing, meeting market specifications, and then there's other things, reducing nutrient loss, benchmarking their progress, so a kind of a personal motivation, or improving the sustainability of business. So the last two there are very personal to the individual or to the farm, that they want to benchmark themselves, they want to improve their own business, whatever about I suppose the other reasons that are external to them and their farm. This is a very interesting one. We also asked, how do you judge your success? And if we look at the data here, it's somewhat surprising. I think we had a lot of debates in the network about this response, but it also identifies maybe an issue that we have in terms of how we judge that. So the first question we asked is, how do farmers judge their success on their own farm? And comparison with previous crop yields was the first one in there. Visual appearance of the crops, nutrient analysis of the harvested produce then was next. Guesswork, no evidence used, they just guessed. In-season crop analysis might be one, or the assessment of yield mapping information. But by and large, when we jump over to the pie chart on the right, people or the respondents were moderately accurate. The level of accuracy was about moderate, if best, on these. So we don't really have a good measure of success, or farmers and the industry is not using a good measure of success in terms of nutrient management to assess how well they did. You know, it's kind of, are we up or down based on last year? And to be honest, weather is probably a bigger factor there. That doesn't really tell you how much nutrients that you applied have been harvested in the crop or taken up by the crop, etc. So this is something that we probably need to work on as, you know, in research, in advisory, but also as an industry in terms of improving this and giving more defined indicators or more accurate indicators or indicators that are more fit for purpose to be able to do this job. Few more slides, just key data used in crop nutrition decisions. Obviously, soil analysis, crop type information, soil information, crop yield information, and previous crop type being the top ones. Previous soil amendments, you know, soil N analysis results in some parts of of Europe, environmental nutrient limits, crop nutrient balance, crop tissue analysis, grain analysis results. You can see there's a mix of data that we're all fairly familiar with, but you know, a lot of that data, there's only 35% of respondents said that they were using it in any meaningful way. So a lot of data out there, and we assume that it's being used, but it may not necessarily be used because there's not a system, there's maybe not a tool that a farmer has identified or an advisor has identified to incorporate that into a final decision. Barriers to adoption of crop nutrition tools, cost, and you know, low farmer income were certainly big ones there as the first two bars here in terms of being prohibitive or a real barrier to investment. The size of the farm, again, too small to carry the financial investment individually. So they may be looking for a contractor or an advisor or whatever to bear that burden and to spread that tool across multiple farms. Lack of farmer awareness was a major one, and education. So you can see here the next 3 or 4 bars are about education, training, awareness of what's out there. You know, agri-contractor, so somebody else is actually doing the work, so you know they don't get involved, and that's, you know, a reality on many farms. And then other barriers, changing traditional practices is difficult. You know, adopting rates and new ideas can be difficult, not considering long-term you know, health and benefits of changing the system, and responding to environmental policy was last on the list in terms of a barrier. Final slide or two. Key needs for farmers to increase precision of nutrient management, education, awareness raising, and access to finance being the top 3 there. Availability of independent research. This was different across different countries in the world. In Europe, should I say, the Eastern countries wanted more of this independent research because they didn't have maybe that established to the same level. If you come to our neck of the woods, that is available, and you know, the percentage of stakeholders saying that was a real need was lower because they already had access. Availability of economic cost-benefit analysis, information on tools and stuff is something that came out as a need. Incentives from industry, incentives from government in terms of access to tools, etc., were also important. And my final slide then, key needs to increase precision of crop nutrient management, and that, you know, in terms of the experts rather than the farmers in the group, it came out to be the same. And if we concentrate on Ireland here in the middle, you know, education was a need by 2/3 of the respondents. Availability to independent research, you know, the experts said that was 100%. We needed that, or farmers needed that. And awareness raising was also very high. Access to advisors, independent crop nutrition advice being important, and incentives from government there at 27%. So look at, I'm going to stop at this point and hand over to my colleague Cathal to take it from here.
Thanks, David. And Carl, when you're ready there, you can share. And David, maybe knock your camera off as well there if you don't mind. And just remind everybody that you have the Q&A there for any questions you have. Thank you.
Okay, so can everybody see that?
Yeah, I think that's good to go there, Carl. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, hi folks, my name is Carl Redmond. I'm TEAGASC Nutrient Management Advisor based here in Johnstown Castle in County Wexford. So, the crop nutrition clubs are a bunch of focus farms who are set up to, I suppose, trial and evaluate new tools and technologies available on the marketplace that can help influence their nutrient management decision making. So Ireland has 3 crop nutrition clubs. We have one in Dublin, one in Kilkenny, and then one in Wexford. So we have a good geographical spread. The crops that we were mainly looking at were cereals, oilseed rape, beans and peas and potatoes. And then the aims of the clubs, I suppose, identified from the farmer needs survey was to reduce reliance on chemical fertilizer, increase yields and crop resilience. So crop resilience will be as a result of pests and diseases or climatic conditions, and then the potential to reduce crop inputs and improve sustainability. So the selection of tools and technologies. So how we did this, so we used a defined search term in Google to identify all the available tools and technologies on the market. Once we had identified the list, we began shortlisting by inclusion and exclusion criteria. So, for example, was the tool available in the English language? Was the tool available in Ireland? What were the, I suppose, the relevance of the tools in an Irish context? So the next thing we did was I would have taken the list of tools to the farmers in, say, discussion group meetings and things like that. And I would have given them an overview of what the tools and technologies actually do and how they can help overcome the challenges to improving nutrient management use on Irish farms. So once we had done this, I would have visited the farms on a one-to-one basis, and the farmers would have went through their barriers, I suppose, and they would have picked tools off the list themselves. So again, TEAGASC didn't pick the tools for the farmers picked the tools themselves, and then it was my job to approach the industry and try and work out a scenario where we could get the tools to the farmers to use for the 2.5-year trial period. Okay, so the first farmer I want to talk about is Don Summers. So a lot of you would already know Don. Don received an award for Sustainable Farmer of the Year there earlier. So Don farms a range of soils from free draining clay soils to heavy wet clay soils, predominantly sand-based, and absolutely everything and anything in between, which adds a layer of complexity to his nutrient management use. So his crop rotation typically would be oilseed rape, winter wheat, spring beans, and then back into a cereal for 2 years, and then bring it back into oilseed rape. So Don is farming a total of 180 hectares in conjunction with his uncle, John. His challenges are managing his soil's fertility. Again, given his range of soil types, this can be tricky. He's aiming for a P index of high 2, so that gives him a little bit of allowance and flexibility with phosphorus use in his crops. Then he's matching organic manure nutrient supply with crop requirements. So Don uses a lot of chicken litter to form the basis of his nitrogen supply in his crops. So organic manure analysis is his planning tool. and that will allow him to measure the total N, P, and K in a sample as received. So knowledge required then to use this tool would be how much nutrients can be delivered from manure and the proportion of total crop nutrient demand. So obviously with total analysis, you still have to work out what the availability is of those nutrients. So with chicken litter, I think it's about 63% availability. And then if you're using pig slurry, it depends, it's about 50% available. So this forms then the basis then for the quantity and type of fertilizer, of synthetic fertilizer he will have to buy. So obviously he has to match the crop demands and balance it up to anything that the chicken litter can't provide. So the key findings: very inexpensive, allows more accurate nutrient management planning, improved knowledge of how much crop nutrient demand can be supplied by the manure, and then it enables the calculation of additional chemical fertilizer to purchase. And I must just say that under the water EIP scheme, testing organic manures comes under a bespoke measure. So there is a payment out there for actually doing that. Right, so tools valued. Then Don would have used the Yara N-Sensor to check and adjust over the growing season. This measures canopy N using reflectance and then can vary the amount of nitrogen applied accordingly. Again, because Don is using chicken litter, there can be discrepancies with the nutrient content. So the aim of this was to use the N-Sensor to actually even out that crop. So knowledge required. So want to reduce the variability of N supply across cereal crops using chicken litter as the N source, and account for mineralized N supply across different soil types, and then adjust fertilizer applications. So key findings: it identifies differences with crop canopy within the crop canopy across the field, and the information needs to be used in conjunction with a fertilizer spreader that's capable of variable rate. So then there's a potential to save nitrogen based on the differences in the crop identified. So for example, this year, Don was able to save about 7.2 kilos of nitrogen per hectare versus his uncle's crops, where he didn't use the N-Sensor and just went with green book values. So 7.2 kilos per hectare of nitrogen is about I think it's €1 a kilo of nitrogen at the minute. So that's €7.20 of saving across his winter wheat. Right. So the next farmer then is Robert Madigan down in Kilkenny. So Robert farms medium clay loams, which are fairly light. So he's been able to min-till since 2018 with his winter crops. His crop rotation is typically oilseed rape, beans, winter wheat, winter barley, spring barley, and then bring it back into 2 years of oats. He's farming 35 hectares, and his main challenges are achieving higher bushel weights in barley and matching manure and nutrient supply with crop requirements. Again, like Don, Robert uses some cattle slurry, so his challenge is to find out what's in that cattle slurry and then match it up, balance it up to crop requirements with synthetic fertilizers. So tools evaluated. So check and adjust. So Robert was using leaf analysis. So this is basically broad spectrum nutrient analysis. So it gives you your N, P, and K, S, and then your trace elements. So knowledge required. So want to assess if crops are lacking in any specific nutrients and solve the issue of low hectoliter weight in the barley. So this assesses canopy health and then can detect and solve crop nutrient deficiencies. So the key findings coming from this, well, it works. So we used 2 years worth of leaf analysis with Robert, and we found that his crops were significant. His barley crops were significantly low in copper and zinc. So we would have done tramline trials and applied these trace elements to solve the deficiencies, and as a result, we increased the kpH in the areas that were applied with zinc and copper, and then also the leaf analysis showed significant differences where copper and zinc were applied. So do they work? So grain analysis and nutrient budgeting was another tool then that Robert used, which assesses the nutrient status on a field by field basis. So nutrient budgeting is basically a credit debit system where you look at the total inputs for N, P, and K, and then you look at the total offtakes that's calculated coming back from the grain analysis. So knowledge required, so it's more information for nutrient management planning and aims to maintain soil fertility and increase long-term crop yields and potential to reduce fertilizer use. So the key findings, some benefits identified, so need to sample grain in good and poor areas within fields to compare results. So if you're just sampling a field, just taking one sample, it's obviously not going to tell you that much. And then need to conduct this analysis over a number of years to better understand the effect of nutrient budgets on soil fertility. So really you need historical data with this for fields, and you can build up an idea of the historical mineralization coming from the field. So then obviously you also need historical nutrient application data and then crop yields from previous years. So my last farmer then is Martin Ennis, based up in Dublin. So Martin farms heavy clay soils, better suited to winter cereals. His typical crop rotation is oilseed rape, followed by barley, winter wheat, and then into oats. He's farming about 400 hectares, and his main challenges are managing soil's fertility to stabilize grain yields in the long term, and then dealing with pests in his oilseed rape crops. So tools evaluated. So the planning tool that Martin is looking at is GPS mapping for soil sampling, and then variable rate lime application. So this is basically individual soil cores. When they're taken, the coordinates are mapped, so you get a better idea of kind of areas, a defined nutrient status in a field. So this informs then his lime application advice, and it will also inform his P and K application. So key findings. So he's used it over the last 8 years. He's achieved more uniform crops as a result by raising soil pH in areas with higher soil acidity across the fields, and his more spatial accurate soil information was fully utilized. So the savings in lime alone pay for the variable rate nutrients and the variable rate nutrient and pH maps. So then check and adjust. So NDVI sensing of crops. So Martin uses @farm to give him maps, which give him basically biomass maps, and he can then vary his nitrogen applications on his oilseed rape from the green area index scores that he gets by using the biomass maps on Yara @farm. So this saves time in walking the crops. So previously he would have had to walk the crops with an advisor and draw up the maps manually. And obviously this takes a lot of time, and it can be significantly more expensive. So then the other thing is the maps are easy to download from the variable rate and input into your variable rate fertilizer spreader. And as a result, this resulted in a more uniform OSR crop. So this was his crop of oilseed rape this year. And as you can see on the picture on the right-hand side, there's a significant amount of damage down in the bottom right and left-hand side corners of the field. And if you look at the image on the left-hand side, that crop has more or less evened out. So with the result that this year, he was actually able to get a yield of 2.4 tons in his crop of oilseed rape that was badly affected by pigeon grazing back in just after Christmas there. So okay, that's my last slide there, folks. So thank you very much.
So Cathal has given a nice overview, I suppose, of the case studies. These are just 3 farmers that kindly worked with us over the couple of years, and the other farmers have evaluated other tools in the clubs and more besides across Europe. So at the moment, to finish the project, we're conducting a cost-benefit analysis across all these tools to work out, which tools are given a benefit, which tools are paying for themselves in terms of return on investment, and which tools, I suppose, out of that mix are less favorable for farmers to be using in terms of a benefit to cost ratio. So that's something that we will bring to you at some point in the future. We're finishing the project and finishing that analysis as we speak. So Noel, that's our piece, and we're happy to take questions.
Great, Cathal, David, thanks very much. That's very interesting, and I think that last point you made there, David, is very important, because one of the first questions that came in was, what are the best ones? What are the top 10? So I think that cost-benefit analysis will be really important.
Yeah, and I can make a comment on that, because we have looked at the primary data. We didn't present it because we want to make sure that it's fully interrogated and fully accurate. But when we look across the tools, some of the primary tools, we'll say the tools that we mightn't think are as cutting edge or as advanced, things like soil analysis, came out to be cost beneficial everywhere. And it's not surprising. So those were primary tools, some of those primary tools. Some of the technologies were less beneficial because of the large cost, I suppose, of investing in the tools in the first place, and also potentially because farmers may not be able to use the full breadth of information that might be coming out of the tool. So they might need additional machinery like a variable rate spreader to be able to use the information more accurately, or to get the full benefit out of the information that's received. So we do have many tools on the shelf. They will sit on the shelf until we overcome barriers like that in terms of cost and benefit, but also technical barriers or ancillary machinery, etc., that might be needed to use the information.
Yeah, and I think the barriers piece is very interesting there. Like you put a lot of information up around that. I suppose a little bit surprised that the driver of the environment driver and policy driver were 33% and 29%, but obviously then the motivation was 44%. But I suppose the question I'm kind of coming to is, you speak about barriers, and we find it in water qualities, which is where I'm more familiar with this, is the knowledge and the cost are kind of the 2 main barriers, and they popped up in your analysis as well as being the 2 main barriers. But I suppose it's not just maybe the farmer that barrier is for, particularly the knowledge piece. It's probably for the advisors as well, that they need to get comfortable with all the range of tools that's out there.
No, and when we break down the analysis, obviously we had a lot of farmers, but they were only 50% of the respondents, or 46 to be accurate. There was still 30% of advisors and agronomists in there, and the rest, the industry. And those, while summary figures and in terms of, maybe didn't have time to get into the granularity of the data, when you burrow down into it, the same needs come up across the different cohorts of stakeholder. So the advisors needed, the cost, the knowledge, the education was still required in those cohorts. So maybe we assume that everybody is au fait with new things, and wrongly so. That we need to do a little bit more explanation, demonstration, and that was certainly called for in some of those responses. That demonstration, rather than formal education, sometimes can be really, really effective.
Yeah, and to get the people who have confidence in providing the advice to the tillage farmers.
Yeah, and Cathal might have a comment on that in terms of demonstration of the tools or whatever, where farmers might have been a little bit, okay, I'm not sure at the start, but then when you do the demonstration, that was fairly effective, Cathal.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we needed to find farmers that would, I suppose, take on the challenges of using these tools, and then kind of show the rest of the farmers in the focus groups that their success stories, and kind of get the rest of them to learn then by a sort of, I suppose, a thematic approach.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's again, I suppose I go back to the water side, but I think that peer-to-peer learning and you know, the early adopters that will take on these technologies are very important, so as that the people that need a little bit more convincing can see them on the ground.
100%, 100%. And look at
And I would say,
yeah.
and just to add there, I would say that anybody who wants to try out these tools and technologies, to do a tramline trial, you know, take maybe half a tramline, so you're not affecting the whole field. So if something does go wrong, you're not out of pocket, substantially out of pocket, and just go from there and try and build confidence year on year by using them in that way, you know.
Absolutely. Fiona, maybe we'll go to the Q&A there and see what's come in.
Yeah, a number of questions for Cathal, Noel, around we'll say initially, Cathal, regarding the Yara N-Sensor that you spoke about there in one of your farmer examples. Could the like of that tool be used, be tied in with GPS data, you know, for example, with soil types or sensitive areas around water courses or wetlands, and improve the environmental outcome as well as the precision of nitrogen nutrient application?
So yeah, good question, Brendan. Yes, so the tool itself won't take into account water courses and ditches and things like that. However, the tool will measure the nitrogen in that canopy. So if there is a waterlogged area, the system will cut right back on the amount of nitrogen applied to that area. So you can give it a total control. So if it senses that there is no crop there, it will actually just shut off the fertilizer spreader completely. So it doesn't account for if there's an area that's waterlogged. However, it will provide you a map of the nitrogen requirement in the field afterwards, in which you can download. And if there's an area that's waterlogged, most likely there's a historical area there that's waterlogged, and year on year it'll give you the same map to show that to reduce the nitrogen use in that area of the field. So I hope that answers the question.
A question for you, David, around the results that you showed in your initial graphs on your presentation. Does it really show that we need a lot more time and effort to be spent with tillage farmers around the whole awareness piece, and that maybe we haven't appreciated, I suppose, how much that is needed?
Yeah, look, I think that's a fair comment, and it came true in the results. You know, we had results there from the Mediterranean to Eastern Europe to Western Europe, but in general, while farmers might be in different places in terms of the level of their production or whatever else, it was true across all the countries that awareness raising and that education piece was really critical. And in terms of spending the time, I think yes, we you know, there's short work windows. Getting planned ahead of time is probably something that we do very well, or farmers do very well. However, the adjustment piece in season is probably not something that happens to the same degree, because the season is progressing. People are busy, they're following their crops and their rotation, and going back to the nutrient management plans, or, you know, adjusting on the fly as you're going through a crop is not something that everybody is used to doing. And something that came out in those surveys was the majority are following the book values. You know, you put the plan in place, you say, I'm going to have X yield and I'm going to fertilize for that X yield But then as the season progresses, you know, the last couple of years are a case in point. Some years are up, some years are down, and that adjustment piece is not something that maybe a farmer is going to take on their own. They need an advisor, they need an agronomist, they need somebody to talk to. If it's a discussion group, their own peers came out very, very strong in that.
And sorry, just to in there, kind of on that, David. I remember one of the slides there, you had a pie chart where some people were or the farmers were given an assessment of their accuracy on their how good their results were. I think is basically what
their nutrient management. Yeah.
And I presume that this gave them a more accurate view of that. And I'm just wondering, you know, when you kind of caught yourself a little bit thinking, I'm doing very well or whatever, when they actually got the proper figures, how did that go down, or what was their kind of thinking? Or were they surprised, or were they saying, Genie, I've been way off, or what was the kind of thinking they had?
Yeah, we just, I suppose, speaking with the Irish group, because it's relevant to the audience here and who we're speaking to. We had farmers, you know, and the experts in a couple of meetings at this point where we brought people together. And, you know, some of those reviewing tools that we use, so where you do the grain analysis and you work out the debit and credit, the nutrients in versus nutrients out. There was a lot of discussion around that for NP and K. Obviously, NP being important from both an agronomic and an environmental standpoint, and then K being, I suppose, more of a nutrient that enables the other ones to be used more efficiently. But with that information, even the variability within a large tillage field was massive, and the levels of efficiency on average in the field might have been reasonable, but then there were spots in that field or large areas that you could manage separately without even variable rate were underperforming, and that was certainly enlightening. So I think the results show that by and large we're either using last year to compare, or we're guesstimating how well we're doing because the crop looks good or whatever else. But probably farmers need more of those tools where there's actually real evidence to say, I'm doing really well, or parts of my fields are doing well, or do that diagnostic with an advisor and say, right, I have a part of my field that I feel is underperforming. There is tools there like analysis, etc., not maybe high technology or computer-based systems that you need to use to do some of that diagnosis to get better results. And the savings in terms of fertilizer, especially chemical fertilizer at the moment with high prices, can be significant across a medium to large tillage farm.
And I suppose maybe on that and that better analysis and better accuracy of what's going on in your farm, you know, and we had a recent document produced by the department there around the 6 NAP and the proposed measures, and one of the proposed measures is around the auto application of nutrients and restricting that organic nutrients. So I suppose is this all sort of feeding into giving a better picture as to that requirement and how it all stacks up from both an environment point of view, but also from a profitability point of view?
Yeah, I think so. I think, you know, the proposal that's out there for public consultation at the moment is you know, that manures in particular that are applied to stubbles in the autumn or whatever else they need a crop, they are fairly quickly afterwards to take up those nutrients and look at that's. I think everybody will agree that that's fairly reasonable. That the potential for loss if there's no crop or no green cover or no cover crop even there, that they could be flushed from the system. I suppose for many of the farmers, and even the examples, the case studies that Cathal presented there, these farmers are using manures. These manures are very beneficial for the farmers from the point of view of supplying nutrients that they don't have to purchase through expensive chemical fertilizer, and they only buy what they need after that. But I suppose having the information and then using the information. We have loads of information. I think most farmers at this stage have soil analysis reports. And the key now is, how can we better utilize that information, or who do we need to help us? Or is there a piece of kit or a piece of technology that will help us? So I think there's tons of information. We're in an information rich period in human history, I would say. Even into social medias, there's AI there and everything else. Without getting too sophisticated and losing the crowd, I think we can do better in terms of the information that we have. And then, for a very small spend, which will give you a return on investment, we can get a little bit more information, like, Cathal has outlined there, the thing like the manure analysis, that might help, the trust piece between a tillage farmer and another farmer. In terms of bringing in manures or importing manures and being able to say that I'm getting X nutrients, I'm actually getting that. And now I can use that in my nutrient management plan with some level of confidence or guarantee that those nutrients are being delivered. And I'm not going to come up short in terms of a crop yield or profitability.
Very good. Fiona, there's loads coming in the Q&A. I'll throw back to you there for a few more before we wrap it up.
Yeah, just a very quick one there. I know you said, David, you'll speak again about the cost analysis and that, but from a cost perspective, do any of the tools or mapping systems that you've looked at, were any of those available freely to farmers, or did they all have a cost, or is it, did it vary across the various countries?
A very good question. So there are tools available, some tools in terms of mapping tools that are available for low cost or free of charge. The issue that we found in the surveys and in that cost benefit analysis was that often we can get the information, the primary information, relatively cheaply. It's then using that information, so putting it spatially into the field with the GPS or whatever, that might be one constraint, or then also applying the nutrients at different rates. So it mightn't be just variable rate, it could be parts of the field that you change the rate on, or headlands that you might change the rate on, or whatever the case may be. And that often is the sticking point or the barrier to being able to actually get a better result or have an impact there. So often we have the information, and it's a fair question. Some tools are a lot cheaper than others. Some tools require additional expenditure on machinery, IT systems, etc., backup, even service, annual service charges, etc., to be able to use them into the long run. And those all need to be taken into account, that it may not be the primary tool that you're after. It may be the ancillary tools or the ancillary supports that might run into the cost prohibitive category for that tool. And look at, we hope to share this information in the near future, and it may explain why a lot of our tools that are very good in from conception to delivery are really sophisticated, really good, but it may explain why they sit on the shelf.
Yeah. Okay. I'm afraid that hour has flown, and we're at the end of the webinar. So I suppose I want to just say thank you to David and Cathal for your webinar, and we will look to forward to your cost benefit analysis webinar later in the year or early next year. I want to thank Fiona for helping out with the questions, Yvonne Maher and Cathal Summers for organising the webinar. As always, next week we will have Dr. William Burchell on the webinar, and he will be presenting on improving nitrogen balances and use efficiencies in Irish grassland. And I suppose that's a very pertinent topic that we're looking at the minute. So William is based in UCC. I also want to bring to your attention the upcoming TEAGASC Climate Conference Farming for a Better Climate, Practical and Emergent Solutions. That's on November 11th in the Tullamore Court Hotel, and you can register online. And if you want further information, go to the TEAGASC website or check out any of the TEAGASC social media platforms for that. And finally, I just want to thank you, the attendees who have joined today and indeed join week in, week out. We really appreciate your loyalty to the webinar. You know, we've always great numbers with over 300 again on the webinar today. So, you know, that's down to you guys coming on board week in, week out, and it helps sustain us going forward. So look, I'll leave it at that. I just want to wish you all a very happy Halloween and enjoy the trick-or-treating tonight, folks. Okay, so have a good day. Thanks, everybody.